All right. Well, we're in this series of the kingdom mindset, and today's going to be a little bit of a discussion day, so I'm just going to give a little bit of a setup here and then try to reserve as much time as possible for us to get into some circles and three or four and really discuss what we've been up to and what we've been covering and dive into some of these questions that I've posed for you there. For those of you that are maybe new or haven't been in a little bit, then we've currently been going through this Kingdom Mindset series, which is includes this mindset model of really understanding how important our mindset is for being anchored and rooted in our faith, and then how we have to be protective over our mindset because it is infiltrated and influenced by everything from family of origin to workspaces and bosses to coaches and teachers to media and film and TV shows and music and the whole nine yards. And if we're not watchful and mindful, remaining steadfast and taking every thought captive, then we can easily be led astray, even though we're going to church on Sunday and we're occasionally cracking open the Bible. And it's really this mindfulness of how much then our mindset impacts our perception, how we see the world, how we see people. And then that then infects our thoughts and our thinking. And all these things are intertwined together. How we think about people. And then ultimately our emotional responses and reactions to people, but ultimately our behavior and outward expression of all of those very things. And so even as we're kind of discussing some of these things this morning, is that I know that when it comes to some of this stuff that I teach, is that there's oftentimes a hesitancy of people thinking, well, if I do this, then I'm just going to be a doormat. And I'm just going to get kind of walked all over. So if I have too much grace for people, or if I'm always giving people the benefit of the doubt, or if I'm, always trying to extend all this patience or all this different stuff, then I'm going to get taken advantage of, and I'm going to get walked all over. And so I think sometimes that's some people's reservation of really pressing into some of the things that we've been talking about and implementing some of the strategies, is that they've kind of grown up within, again, this mindset that I need to stand my ground, I need to protect my space, I need to defend myself, or all these different things. And so since they fear being a doormat and being walked all over, they never really embrace this kind of a lifestyle of living Christ-like. Is that Christ was certainly taken advantage of by people. He had grace for people that ended up kind of throwing it back in his face, or that did go and sin some more, or whatever it was. But we're called to honor him and follow him in that. And even all these different kind of national and international issues that we're discussing, I believe personally, are solved at the relational level. Is that there's only so much that can be done through posting on social media. And I think a lot of times people just want to sit around and talk about all the problems and commiserate and kind of bond and rally together for a brief moment, talking about how terrible things are, only to just stress themselves out, overwhelm themselves, and then they don't feel like they can actually do anything about it. So they just spend their whole day, ruminating, watching news about how terrible things are that they can't actually do anything about other than cast a vote is the furthest that they can get of that. Or that they post on social media and kind of become part of this growing demographic of what's called slacktivists, where because I made my post on social media, now I feel like I've done my work. Like my job is done here. 120 characters of pure fury, and now I'm back to my work, or whatever it is. So it's just because we're throwing these things out on social media, we feel like we've kind of done something or we've made our contribution, when really it's just the algorithms are, rivaling the rage between us all and dividing us even further, where it's about really living a lifestyle that's Christ-like, that's going to make the difference. And the world loves to see Christians being hypocritical, saying one thing or condemning one group and then going out and acting crazy in their own, different way. Or the news loves it when another pastor, big-time pastor, has a moral failure and ends up divorced. They love those sorts of things because it adds fuel to the fire of their animosity against Christianity. That's why it's so important to live Christ-like. And again, not that that's going to mean that everybody is going to like us for being Christ-like, because Christ said, if they hate me, they're going to hate you. The one thing he guaranteed was persecution. But it's doing it at a relational level. That doesn't mean that, again, we're going to always be the doormat. That doesn't mean that just because we're doing it at a relational level means that it's always going to be welcomed. But I think the more we can grow in the ability to do it with spiritual discernment and emotional intelligence, then we can help keep the calm in some of those conversations that produces productivity and effectiveness. So we always want to be asking ourselves, like, are the things that I'm doing to kind of combat the cultural wars, are they even effective? And so I really believe that this kind of relational approach is the most effective in that. And a couple of comments just real quick that I put down here was that what this does is that it helps you to be more discerning with people and reserve judgment. So by hitting the pause button, reflecting on kind of what we've gone over of hurt people, and people aren't giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time, and some of these other kind of various things that help to anchor our thinking and give us some perspective, is that it helps us to simply have patience and reserve judgment. And what that does is it allows us to be more discerning so that we can judge fairly and accurately when we do. And we need to get the log out of our own eye first so that we can actually do those very things. And then with some of this too, it's actually seeing breakthrough in relationships. Is that I know that there's guys in here that need breakthrough in marriage, that need breakthrough with a girlfriend, or with a child, or with a coworker. All of us have some sort of tension-filled relationship in our life that could use breakthrough. And I think that this is an opportunity for us to really settle in and be able to do just that. And so what we have here is an opportunity for us to kind of actually sit and talk with one another and hopefully get real and be honest about where you're at with some of this stuff. And the side of the page that we're going to actually focus on is page 35. Those are the questions we're going to focus on for our group discussions, and I included some additional questions and way of thinking about this that you can take with you and reflect on personally afterwards. And that gets into what I alluded to last week of David's mightiest warriors, and that a lot of the kind of the warrior mentality of David's mightiest men, which was wielding swords and killing 600 people in a single day outing and all that stuff, is that's not quite going to be our calling in this life. And so we've got to think about, what does it look like to be God's mighty warriors in this day and age, in these relationships, and in this way. So you can hang on to that, but what I want us to focus on for our time, again, in groups of like 3 or 4, so that you can have more time to actually discuss. Once you get over 4, then it's just going to kind of bounce around more often, and you won't be able to get as far. So with that, be looking at these questions and even potentially thinking about, what's the question on here for me that I need to answer and share my response with somebody before I leave here today. So you can kind of work your way down, but perhaps you're looking at some of the lower questions and you're like, that's a question that really feels pressing for me. So if you're starting to run out of time, be willing to say, like, hey, the question I need to share about for me personally is, whichever one that may be. And so with these, just real quick, is the perception. So what circumstances, again, thinking about perception and thoughts, our last 2 topics of conversation. What circumstances in your life have you been seeing merely from a human point of view, not from God's? In other words, what life challenges have caused you to lose your godly perspective? What are the noticeable changes in you, your thinking, emotions, reactions, when that happens? What does it cause you to see or not see in those circumstances and moments? So we're trying to, again, take captive our mindset in this way. And then the second part of that, and these are some meaty questions, so you really think about it and share, but who is one person that you've had a positive sentiment toward, as we talked about in the previous week? And for those of you that might not have been here, one of the guys in the group can share a little bit more, just a brief description of positive versus negative sentiment. But who is one person you have a negative sentiment toward, or hardened heart toward? Maybe a spouse, child, friend, sibling, colleague, fellow churchgoer, political group. What does your sentiment toward each of them reflect your thoughts, emotions, engagement, reactions toward them? What's one change you need to make toward that person with whom you have a negative sentiment? Come clean, ask for forgiveness, hit the pause button, breathe, refocus, pray for them, and not the Sons of Thunder prayer, where he's like, should we ask God to send down the fire upon them? But actually like a humble prayer for them. Send them an encouraging text. And then the questions below under thoughts. Who is someone with whom you've had false witness or testimony against? Think about another way. Who is someone with whom you have allowed for a false, distorted, or over-embellished or negative story to be written about in your mind? This can be caused by resentment, jealousy, or believing gossip, or hurtful things that they've done to you in their past. What ways has that altered how you approach them and treat them? With whom have you had a harsh startup with, or who has had one with you? And harsh startup is just beginning a conversation or beginning an interaction with a criticism, with contempt, with frustration, anger, those sorts of things. And what would it take for you to get to a state of mind so you could have a soft startup or a soft response of grace and peace to their harsh startup of criticism, frustration, and anger? Would you be willing to pray for this person? Or would you be willing to pray this prayer? Why or why not? Lord, if someone is having a hard time and they're going to take it out on someone else today, let it be me. How would that prayer change how you walk through your day and interact with people? So some deep questions there to dive into in some smaller groups, process through, share some examples, share some illustrations, and this is where it gets real and actually prepares us to be able to walk this thing out throughout the rest of our days and actually be transformed and remain free. Now that Christ has set you free, now make sure you stay free and don't take the bait that all these people want to offer us to rope us into anger and contempt and criticism, and now we're just acting a fool and driving the wedge even further rather than softening people's hearts and going about it the right way. All right?